The internet has been in an uproar since the authorities in Congo announced the planned execution of 170 prisoners on death row. According to the authorities, the prisoners were armed robbers and urban bandits who had been causing chaos and violence across several cities in the country. The interesting thing is that the majority of the prisoners were between the ages of 18 and 35. While some, especially those in the international community, have condemned the move, others in Congo applaud the decision of the Congolese government. But the big question is, will the death penalty help to reduce the insecurity and violence in Congo cities? Let's find out. As you know, the DRC is one of those African countries that has been experiencing severe insecurity and violence for decades. According to several reports, there are more than 100 different armed groups operating in the country, including the notorious M23 group. Many of these groups regularly perpetrate widespread violations and abuses against civilians that may amount to crimes against humanity and war crimes. In addition to this, the country also has to deal with local urban gangs known as the KULUNAS, who have also incited violence and chaos in the country. Prior to all these, the government of Congo had abolished the death penalty in 1981, with the last executions held in 2003. However, the law was reinstated in 2006. Now, since Felix Tshisekedi, the president of Congo, resumed office in 2019, the insecurity and chaos have been on the increase, even in its capital city, Kinshasa. The perpetrators of this insecurity are none other than the KULUNAS. Perhaps the pressure of dealing with insecurity from every angle is what pushed the government to announce the resumption of capital punishment in March 2024. According to the DRC authorities, the decision to reinstate was necessary to thwart escalating violence, gang-related rebellion, and collaboration with the Rwanda-backed M23 rebels in the country's eastern regions. Speaking on the decision, President Felix Tshisekedi said the decision was made with a view to ridding the DRC army of traitors on the one hand and curbing the resurgence of acts of urban terrorism resulting in the death of men on the other. On Sunday, January 12th, authorities in Congo announced that more than 170 inmates on death row were flown from Congo's capital to a high-security prison in the north, where they will be executed. According to the Congolese Minister of Justice, Constant Mutamba, 70 of the prisoners were transported on Sunday, while about 102 had already been sent to Anjenga prison in the northern Mongala province. The Congolese minister further revealed that men have been convicted of armed robbery and are locally known as KULUNAS, or urban bandits. They're aged between 18 and 35, he said. Some people, especially residents of Congo, have welcomed the development. This is not surprising given that they are the ones who have had to deal with the violence and chaos launched by the KULUNAS. Fiston Kakule, a resident of the eastern city of Goma, said, "We welcome this decision by the minister because it will help put an end to urban crime. From 8 p.m. onwards, you can't move around freely because you're afraid of running into a KULUNA." Others, however, especially from the international community as well as human rights activists in Congo, have condemned the move by the Congolese government. Espoir Muhinuka, a human rights activist, warned of the possibility of extrajudicial executions and called for a strict respect for judicial procedures and fundamental guarantees. He fears that political pressure could lead to unjust convictions and arbitrary executions. The situation in the DRC is complex and requires a multidimensional approach. The fight against urban gangs must go hand in hand with efforts to combat poverty, unemployment, and social exclusion, which are often contributing factors to crime, he said. Similar sentiments were also echoed by the regional director of Amnesty International for East and Southern Africa, Tigere Chaguta. He said, "The government's decision to reinstate executions is a gross injustice for people sentenced to death in the Democratic Republic of Congo and shows a callous disregard for the right to life. It is a huge step backwards for the country and a further sign that the Tshisekedi administration is backtracking on its commitment to respect human rights." Chaguta also added that, whether those who have been sentenced to death are in the national army or police, in armed groups, or have been involved in gang violence, everyone has a right to life, and for that right to be protected. Before we proceed, here is a reminder to like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe to our channel if you have not done so already. Regardless of these sentiments, the authorities in Congo seem determined to continue with the executions, and for good reason. You see, the KULUNAS, also referred to as urban bandits, are widely known for their brutal method of inciting violence in the Congolese capital city, as well as other cities in the country. These groups wield spiked clubs, machetes, and firearms to carry out violent robberies, leaving a trail of devastation, injuries, and even death. The activities of the KULUNAS prompted an urgent response from the government, which was under pressure from the citizens. The government declared war on the gangs with a sweeping initiative called Operation Zero Kuluna. Leading the operation was the Minister of Justice, Constant Mutamba, a man whose resolve left no room for negotiation with the gangs. Under the leadership of the Minister of Justice, many of these gang members were apprehended and executed. According to the reports, 45 of them were executed in December, while another 57 were recently executed. From the videos released online, the KULUNAS, majority of whom were young men, could be seen crying and pleading for mercy. Now, it would interest you to know that the gangs were associated specifically with Kinshasa, but they have now been spreading to other cities, even crossing the Congo River, and causing insecurity and a brutal police backlash in the capital of the neighboring Republic of Congo, Brazzaville. The gangs began to appear at the start of the 21st century, and it can be said that they are a product of the deep political, economic, and social crisis of the late 1990s. As you know, the regime of the former President Mobutu Sese Seko in the 1990s resulted in political and urban decline, leading to a complete breakdown of law and order. In a period of anarchy and civil war, the street gangs emerged in the poorest slums of Kinshasa as a way to survive by any means possible. Since then, they have proliferated and institutionalized. Since the early 2000s, the KULUNA gangs have expanded into the capital city and are everywhere in Kinshasa except for the city center, Gombe, where big businesses, ministries, and embassies are located. The structure of the street gangs is based on an informal hierarchy. The KULUNA gangs are extremely local. They own and protect a neighborhood. They provide safety for their Kinshasa neighborhood. This means that they attack the strangers passing in by, but they do not target those who live there. Gang fighting is the key to fame and glory and an essential part of the KULUNA way of life, almost as important as criminal activities. However, crime is only a way of getting food, alcohol, and drugs. At nightfall, youth gangs transform the streets of Kinshasa's slums into fighting arenas. Contrary to belief, the KULUNAS do not live on the fringes of society. Instead, they are well integrated into their urban environment. This is unlike the shegi or street children who are abandoned by their families and considered sorcerers. For the KULUNAS, the local authorities, such as the chef de quartier or chef de rue, know and interact with them. Far from the cliché about gang members, they get jobs in the informal economy and are not social outcasts. In addition to this, the KULUNAS have built ties with the security forces and the politicians of the city. The political parties generally use the KULUNA gangs as a workforce. Politicians hire them for various purposes, all related to the widespread use of violence in the political arena. The KULUNAS are tasked with intimidating political rivals, sabotaging political rivals' public gatherings, and providing close protection to politicians. However, the most lucrative criminal partnership of the KULUNA gangs is the one with the security forces. Policemen and military officers are paid to turn a blind eye, and they are subcontracting some criminal activities to the youth gangs. This illicit cooperative practice between the law enforcement agencies and the criminals is called the coup and is surprisingly quite common. Sometimes the security personnel are also involved in the gangs' businesses. They provide the gangs with weapons, information, and protection, and are reselling the stolen goods. As a result of the cooperation between the police and KULUNA gangs, policemen go as far as helping some gangs fight against their rivals and using their influence in case of arrest. This illicit partnership between the police and the gangs is why the actions of the Congolese government have not been effective in eradicating the gang. Since 2013, the Congolese authorities have launched several anti-KULUNA operations, the most notorious being Lekofi 1. During the first operation, Lekofi, between November 2013 and February 2014, the Congolese police summarily executed at least 51 young men and boys and forcibly disappeared 31 others. However, the brutal repression of youth gangs by police forces has neither solved nor contained the Kuluna problem, and so has not advanced safety in Kinshasa. Perhaps this was why the government decided to reinstate the death penalty. Right now, it remains to be seen whether the death penalty will help to reduce the gang violence in Kinshasa and other Congolese cities. Now, the DRC is not the only country that has reinstated the death penalty in recent times. Burkina Faso, under the leadership of President Traoré, announced a few months ago that it was considering reinstating the death penalty. Burkina Faso once operated the death penalty, but it was eventually abolished from the Burkinabe Penal Code in 2018. The last executions to have happened in Burkina Faso was carried out in September 1988 by the administration of former President Blaise Compaoré. This execution resulted in the death of 4 Burkinabe politicians who were accused of orchestrating a coup against Compaoré. The politicians include the Defense Minister, Jean-Baptiste Boucari, the Minister of Economic Promotion, Henri Zongo, and 2 unidentified men. However, under President Traoré's administration, there are hints that the death penalty would be reinstated. Although there is currently no timeline for when it would be reinstated, it was revealed that the government is currently discussing the restoration of the death penalty before making a proposal to the Transitional Legislative Assembly for adoption. The Burkinabe Minister of Justice, Minister Edaso Rodrigue Bayala, confirmed this when he said that the issue of the death penalty is being discussed and will be implemented in a new criminal code to follow the vision and instructions of the head of state, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. So, the question is, why will a leader like Traoré consider establishing the death penalty? Well, firstly, according to judicial and civil society sources in Burkina Faso, Traoré plans to apply the death penalty to terrorism-related crimes. As you know, Burkina Faso has been dealing with insecurity and terrorism for a long time, perpetuated by Islamic jihadist groups. This has led to the death of thousands of people, with many more displaced and injured. And the president has been hard at work trying to combat this crisis which external militaries such as France could not solve. So, the death penalty is simply another way of combating the insecurity and terrorism in Burkina Faso. This means that anyone caught, including Burkinabe citizens involved in terrorism acts, will be subjected to the death penalty. In addition to this, President Traoré has been faced with opposition from every side since he took over power in Burkina Faso. If you recall, Traoré has experienced more than 10 coups since he became president, and most of the coups were orchestrated with traitors in the military and even civilians. The 10th coup, for instance, was orchestrated by the former military junta of Burkina Faso, Paul-Henri Damiba. Interestingly, this man is currently in exile in Togo, but it was from Togo that he orchestrated the wicked plot together with some high-profile individuals in Burkina Faso to overthrow Traoré. At the time it occurred, it was revealed that the plan involved collaborating with insurgents and terrorists to launch attacks against the government and civilians. The popular Bachalogo incidents, which claimed hundreds of civilian lives and soldiers, was part of the plot. All of this was to weaken the leadership of Traoré and make it seem as if he was not competent enough to lead Burkina Faso. Thankfully, some of those involved were caught and the plot was stopped. In this situation, these individuals involved in Jaude plot certainly deserve the death penalty. So introducing the death penalty will serve as a deterrent for any Burkinabe citizen who wants to get involved in any destabilization plot. However, the West, which believes in democracy, freedom of speech, and justice, has demanded that Traoré drop the idea of reinstating the death penalty. In fact, Human Rights Watch recently released an article where it wrote, "Burkina Faso has genuine security concerns, but should recognize the death penalty's inherent cruelty and reject any plans to reinstate it. But our question is, how is it any of their concern?" These people have called Traoré a dictator, and according to the dictionary, a dictator is someone who holds absolute power. But if the dictator is leading the nation on the right path, doesn't that count for something? It certainly does. Supposing Traoré was one of those African leaders who are known for their corruption and luxury lifestyle at the expense of those citizens, then introducing the death penalty will certainly be a problem. However, since he came to power, Traore has proven that he is very different from the usual type of African leaders we know. His entire focus and priority is to see Burkina Faso safe again and achieve self-sufficiency in every aspect. How can a leader like this be termed a dictator? Well, as we said earlier, whenever a leader or a country does something that goes against what the West believes is right, that leader is automatically termed a dictator. However, regardless of what the West thinks, every African country is free to do what they believe is right for their country. What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments section below. Don't forget to like this video, drop a comment, and share.